What is up, fam? It's your boy Paul P. Henny, and this is the One Day at a Time podcast. That's right, fam. And we're coming at you every week. As a matter of fact, we're coming at you every Monday. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and leave a rating and share, because you never know if somebody might find some value from what we are doing here. So today, fam, I'm so excited to talk about this topic. And this topic is one of my favorite things to talk about. And that topic is simply this: joy. Joy. And one thing I've learned over the course of years, fam, is that joy is a choice. Okay? See, you can choose to live a joyful life, or you can choose not to live a joyful life. Here's the thing. Sometimes our circumstances will simply tell us to not live with joy. But here's the thing, fam. As I was looking at this topic and I was looking at this word joy, this is what I ended up finding. Joy can simply be defined as inner gladness despite your circumstances. Inner gladness despite your circumstances. So despite whatever it is you're going through, despite whatever ups and downs you have, whether things are going great or whether things are not going so great, you still choose to have that sense of inner gladness. Inner gladness. So as I was thinking about this, I thought about a situation, quite honestly, from a couple years ago, because I want to really talk about how do we get there? How do we get to that place where we have this perspective of inner joy or joy, which would be that inner gladness. So I thought about a personal experience of mine. And, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that my family recently transitioned to Detroit, Michigan. We recently transitioned to Detroit, Michigan, and I tell you what, it has been a journey, but it's definitely been a welcome journey. It's been a really good thing. Although there was a lot of excitement for us, and as we made this transition, as I took on a new job, a new position, the reality is I did have to leave my former position. And fam, I'll be honest, the challenge with that is I really care deeply about that community. I care deeply about the children that we were serving, at my last job. I care deeply about the staff that I worked with. So, although there was a level of excitement as my family traveled and transitioned from Richmond, Virginia to Detroit, Michigan, the reality is we also left some people behind. And if I really want to be honest, when I left my last job, it was kind of rough. I'm forever grateful for my former supervisor for, offering me the opportunity to get back into education. And I'm glad that, ever since I've been here, we've caught up, on a handful of times, because I really appreciate his family. But the reality is, my last year there, we dealt with some ups and downs. And if you've been in leadership or if you've been a part of a team, at any point of your life, the reality is you've probably been there where sometimes you have a desired result in one area, but you have maybe a slightly different path of getting there. And if I'm honest, we dealt with that a little bit. It wasn't always fun. It didn't change the fact, that I love the guy and the guy loved me, right? But the reality is, so we had a different route to get to, a certain end result. It was very challenging, especially when you're working with somebody, that you get to the point where you begin to love and respect. So what happened was, I wasn't planning on leaving the job at all. As a matter of fact, I had signed up for my next year. I had absolutely no plan, no desire to leave, because one thing I told him, and I meant it with all my heart, was, hey man, we're gonna figure this out. And I was looking forward to that summer of team building. I was looking forward to the following year of just working through some things and, trying to figure out, okay, what could I do better? What was it, perhaps my perspective was wrong from time to time. And I was really looking forward to, to going going through those things, to working through, some of those things. And then I get this call about coming to Detroit, Michigan. And quite honestly, if you would have asked me anywhere that I wanted to live, within the United States. Now, granted, I was in Virginia my entire life. Detroit probably wouldn't have been on my top 10 list. It's simply because I never wanted to move anywhere up north. I mean, really simply for that reason. So when this job opportunity came, as much excitement as it was, the challenge was I was leaving a job behind. As a matter of fact, I was leaving a leadership team behind that I got to a point where I deeply cared for them, and they deeply cared for me, and they deeply cared for my family. So it was challenging, fam. I mean, it really was. I think there were a lot of emotions throughout that process, and I already know I will never forget when I told him that I was leaving. It was hard. It was hard for both of us, because I don't take that type of stuff lightly. I don't take it lightly that I'm leaving a gap within a school that I deeply care about. So throughout the process, there was definitely some frustration involved with some of our communication, and so on and so forth. And I'm sharing this because I know I'm not the only one that's been there. If you fast forward actually to the middle of that summer, so before we moved to Detroit, but after I said something about leaving this job, we had a mission trip that was already planned. My wife and I had decided to take a mission trip to Ethiopia. So we were in this place called Dawa, and I tell you what, it was life changing, fam. It was life changing. My wife was the mission trip photographer. I was the 8th grade teacher, and part of my job, part of my responsibility was to help the 8th graders learn English, because they had to learn English in order to get to university. But one of the things that we had an opportunity to do while we were there, we had an opportunity to go to the village. And fam, the village that we visited, not everybody, in Dawa where we were was poor. As a matter of fact, one of the houses that we went to was actually fairly nice. It was actually fairly nice. But the village that we served, it was definitely what you would look at as a third world type of village. I remember going into a house. I went to a couple of houses, and there was no running water. If I look at the room where I am right now, some of the houses were about the size of this room, maybe a little bigger, with no running water, no kitchen. And I'm sitting up here like, wow, this is actually your house. And it was really eye-opening. And I remember going to visit one house, and there was this guy named Muhammad. And we walk in the house. Muhammad tells us, "Go ahead and have a seat." And I'm looking around, and there was no place to sit. But he had so much joy, fam. He had so much joy. So everybody that walked in, we found a spot on the floor. And I remember sitting on his floor, and I'm looking at this man laying on the mat. He had no fingers, and he had no toes, and he was just laying there, missing his fingers, missing his toes, and this box of a house, if you will. Yet this guy was filled with so much joy. It was one of the warmest welcomes that I'd ever had to anybody's house. And I'm looking at this guy. I'm looking at him. And we're having conversation, and the conversation is going great. He was so happy to have us. But what I took from that was this deep sense of joy that this guy, Muhammad, had. So I'm looking at his surroundings. I see no running water. I see no bathroom. I see no restroom. I don't see a sink where you can wash your hands. I'm like, I don't see his fingers on his hands. I don't see toes on his feet. But this guy is filled with joy. He's filled with joy. I would soon come to find out that he was actually one of the village elders. And the church that we were with, the church that we were with on this trip, they had been working with him, and he was so grateful, for the resources that had been provided, for the time that had been spent over the course of years, spending time, investing in him, investing in the community. I realized that for him, joy at this point was a choice. It would have been easy for him to look at his circumstances. I can imagine him getting to the point where he's looking at his hands every day or looking at his feet and seeing the missing members of his body. But fam, that's not what he was doing. He was filled with joy. There were other times I would see him in the community and he would have his shoes and he would, he would put his shirt on, if you will, and he was walking around just filled with joy. And I'll be honest, fam, as I thought about that, it really messed with me. Because on the flight over to Ethiopia, I thought quite a bit about this situation that I was leaving in Richmond, Virginia. Was there some frustration? Yeah, there was still some lingering frustration. Yeah, there was, of course, some excitement headed to my next job, but there was still some frustration because I felt like we didn't necessarily get to the point of closure that I would have liked to have had. And I really appreciate being a part of a peaceful environment. And I felt like we weren't able to get to that point prior to me leaving. And some of the conversations, quite honestly, they were a bit rough. But that passion from both of us was simply from both of us wanting to see good things done, the right things done, the children being served well. We just had different ways of, potentially going about it, which led to some of that frustration. But I will never recall that night after leaving Muhammad's house, really taking some evaluation of my circumstance, taking some evaluation of the things that I may have been frustrated about. And it really caused me to take a step back. It wasn't to take a step back to say that maybe some of the feelings that I had weren't valid. Quite honestly, I believe my feelings were valid, and I also believe the guy that I was working with, I believe that his feelings were valid. I do believe that they were valid. But why all of this frustration? You see, fam, the reality is sometimes frustration is the result of not seeing eye to eye. That can be the fruit of not seeing eye to eye with someone or with a team when it comes to dealing with a certain project. But I felt like in this particular situation, I allowed that frustration to really grab a hold of me to the point where I had begun to lose that joy that, quite honestly, that I was accustomed to be known for at this point in time. And it took for me to go all the way across the world, if you will, to Ethiopia and to see a man living in what some would say a box house, if you will. Right, quite honestly, like once again, about the size of this room that I'm in right now. No running water, no bathroom, no kitchen, no fingers, no toes. Yet he still found a way to be filled with joy. What it did was it caused me to seriously to reevaluate myself and to reevaluate my life. I was able to trace the joy that this man, Muhammad, had back to one thing. Okay? Actually, there were a couple things, but one thing that I really want to focus on today, and that was gratitude. One thing about Muhammad is that he had an attitude of gratitude. He did. I mean, this guy was so grateful, and he wasn't the only one. Once again, he was one of the village elders that we were serving. And this village, quite honestly, the church that we were with had been serving this village for quite some time. So everybody that we came across, there was such a sense of gratitude. That we would pack up and travel across the world in order to serve this village. A lot of us were using, whatever vacation time that it had. So rather than, taking our vacation time and going on a family trip, we said, no, we're going to take our vacation time and we are going to serve this community. As a matter of fact, some of the people that we were working with, they actually made it a point to say, I know that you could be anywhere, but you're actually using whatever vacation time to come help us. Wow. I really appreciate that. And quite honestly, I hadn't even thought of it that way, but that is what we were doing. So what Muhammad was experiencing was an attitude of gratitude, which led to joy. Joy. He knew that some of the decisions that he had made in his life, and I can't get into, to all the stuff. I don't want to get into all of it because I don't know all the details enough to be able to explain everything, out of respect to him. But I knew that he had come across some challenges which had caused him to lose his fingers and lose his toes. I knew that he had gone through some health challenges that led to that. And he still found a way to be filled with joy. I really believe, fam, that gratitude was at the very least a part of the reason, a part of the source of this perpetual joy that he had. Perpetual joy. These are the questions that I really began to think about after leaving there. I will never forget that plane. Quite honestly, getting back to our residence that night, I really pondered some things. I really began to ponder, what's my focus? What is it that I'm focusing on? Am I focusing on things that may frustrate me? Or am I choosing to focus on things that will continue to highlight the gratitude that I should be living with? Once again, an attitude of gratitude can lead to a life of joy. Am I focusing on what I don't have? Am I focusing on my perspective not being seen, not being heard? Or am I focusing on finding ways to be grateful in the midst of whatever it is may be going on? Fam, I'll be honest, I struggled up until this point. It really took for me to sit with this man, hear the things that he was saying, watch how he moved, listen to how he talked, hear the sense of genuine gratitude, the sense of genuine joy, in his heart, pouring from his heart, in his voice. It really took for me to hear the sense of joy pouring from his heart. From the expressions on his face, the words that came out of his mouth, fam, there was just genuine joy. I had to think about it. I had to really, really think about it. Are we focusing on what has gone wrong? Or are we grateful for the many things that we have that are going right? Are we focused on our current circumstance? Or are we finding reasons to be grateful? Fam, as we wrap up today, I really want you to think about your life. Think about your life. Think about those things, that the Lord has blessed you with, because guess what? Even if you are in a tough situation, and I know some of you out there have some hard things going on, but in the midst of those hard things, what I want you to do is to find a reason to be joyful. Find a reason to have an attitude of gratitude, because an attitude of gratitude will lead to a life filled with joy. Once again, this word joy, we're talking about inner gladness despite the circumstances. And fam, that is what I desire for you. Inner gladness despite your circumstance. Remember this, an attitude of gratitude will lead to a life filled with joy. Fam, as we wrap up today, I want you to remember this, that we are learning together, we are growing together, and we are growing in our joy and getting better. One day at a time. You got this.